Welcome in to another episode of Home Field Advantage. Hope you're all having a great week wherever you may be across our great country or our great land. Coming to you live on YouTube this morning, a little bit different. Also, no intro music, no pleasantries on the audio. Just going to give you a quick Boston Bruins season preview. Been having a cold this week, so you can probably tell in my voice does not sound great, but we are here, and we are trying to just power through. All right, so it was lost on me that with the introduction of Odd Man Rush, which is the hockey-centric podcast that Diesel and I put on here at Sportland USA, it was lost on me that I still have to do the Boston Bruins preview, which I've done the past two seasons. And I'd be remiss if I didn't try and do it again, much like I did with the Red Sox and with the Patriots and with the Celtics and with every other Boston team. Because I know that a majority of my listeners reside in New England and are fans of these teams. So, with that said, I'm going to take the next few minutes and break down the Bruins preseason situation, where we stand, even after last night being the first game. So, in case you missed it, last night the Bruins played their first game of the season. That's when I realized I needed to do this morning. I was planning on talking about Major League Baseball and the playoffs, but alas, plans change. I'll do that in a live video later today when I'm hopefully feeling better. But for the Bruins, they win last night. In case you missed it, they win 3-1 over the Chicago Blackhawks. It was Connor Bedard's first game in Boston, obviously just the second game of his career. And his first goal came in last night's game, assisted by Taylor Hall and Ryan Donato. And also, Jared Tenorti was on the ice. So you had three former Bruins on the ice with Connor Bedard in Boston when he scored his first goal. That's going to be a trivia question someday. Mark my words. All right, so that happened. Then, fast forward, Bruins end up tying the game. Trent Frederick scores, I believe either late in the first or early in the second, and then Pasternak in the second, and then Pasternak again in the third. So the Bruins go on to win 3-1, and they begin their season with a W, much like they have the last two seasons, I believe. So where does that leave the team? All right, so the Bruins have a interesting season ahead of them, right? It's their 100th year anniversary. They're coming off major success in the regular season and then major letdown in the postseason. And they've lost David Krejci, Patrice Bergeron, Taylor Hall, and Tyler Bertuzzi, Dmitry Orlov, and Garnet Hathaway. So they've lost three veteran players that were on their team at the beginning of last year, and they lost the three acquisitions they made at the trade deadline, just to name a few. So they also ended up waiving AJ Greer, who was a fourth-line winger for them last year. He ends up with the Flames. So Bruins have a little bit of roster turnover, right? They end up bringing in Kevin Shattenkirk on the defense to replace Orlov's minutes, so to speak. They bring in James Van Riemsdyk, who's a great veteran net front player, who's going to play probably on a wing opposite Pasternak. They bring back Milan Lucic for 1 year. Milan Lucic is going to be sort of your fourth line bruiser, but then last night he ended up playing on the first line a lot and grabbing an assist. So it remains to be seen what really the plan is with Lucic in this lineup. They bring in Morgan Geekie, who I was high on a few years ago during the expansion draft with Seattle. He ends up probably going to play third line center or fourth line center because Thomas Nosek also departed. And then they also bring in Patrick Brown, and they bring in Oh gosh. Is that it? I think that's it, because I already mentioned Kevin Shattenkirk. So they bring in some veteran players, essentially, to replace other veteran players. Um, sorry if you're watching on YouTube. That's blowing my nose, and it's the show must go on. And I apologize. I know that it's gross, but we all do it, and it's not very fun. All right, so moving on though. The biggest strength of the Bruins, though, is that they were able to head from their record-breaking 2022-23 season into this season without having to let go of one of their goalies. So both Swayman and Allmark are still in black and gold this season. That will be a huge, um, it'll be a huge asset for them to have two starting caliber goalies. I supposedly Famous said the other night on Odd Man Rush that Swayman could start on probably 20 other teams in the NHL, but he's a second stringer on the Bruins. That's going to be something to watch this year if that holds. Um, we'll see if Jim Montgomery stays to the same. What's the word I'm looking for? Strategy as he did in 2022, 23. So if you look at all the position groups, there's still some players from last year who are around despite all the roster turnover, especially on defense. You have your top four roughly being McAvoy, Grzelcyk, Lindholm, and Carlo, in no particular order. Obviously, McAvoy probably being your best defenseman overall. Those four stay. You end up with Forbert still there, and then you have Shattenkirk. So you get a little bit older on the defense, but you also get a little bit, I don't know, you get bigger. You get bigger in that respect. In the forward group, you're going to probably end up seeing um, a little bit of shifting here for the first few months of the season. I think their third and fourth line depth isn't great as it has been in the past. I mean, for crying out loud, they had a Hart Trophy winner playing on the third line last year in Taylor Hall. You don't have that luxury anymore. But the big thing to watch with the forwards is that you have two young centers essentially taking over some of the responsibilities that were left in the absence of Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci. So, with that said, John Beecher and Matthew Poitras, or Patra, I was saying his name wrong the other day, Matthew Patra. Between Patra and Beecher, you have two young guys who kind of play a different game than one another, but still have high upside. And I think the Bruins are hoping that they can get some valuable experience. And so far, they've looked pretty good. I mean, Beecher had a lot of good time last night moving the puck. I thought Patra did the same thing. Believe he recorded a point on the Pasternak goal. So who knows what we'll see out of those guys. And then the other thing is, how's somebody like Coyle or Zaka going to react? Your other two centers, playing maybe elevating or declining where they sit in the lineup based on those two young guys. It's something to watch as well. Geeky is also another one of your centers, but he and Coyle, I could see playing wing at some point as well, depending on what they want to do with Patra and Beecher. The rest of your forward group is pretty established. We know about Pasternak, DeBrusk, and Brad Marchand. Those are some of your best scorers from last year coming back. Going to play very similar roles, albeit the power play will look much different without Bergeron. You saw last night that Van Riemsdyk was taking a lot of those opportunities down in front of the net. Later on, you also saw that Pasternak returned to form scoring goals. Now, while I don't think he's on pace to score 164 goals, he's certainly, like he scored 2 last night, I think he's certainly going to carry you offensively. So there's positive things to look at there. Wow, this is bad. I feel so gross doing this. Everyone's probably like, what the hell is wrong with you? You should not have recorded while you're blowing your nose. I apologize. The show must go on, especially when it comes the Bruins hockey and this program. All right. For lack of any more cringy stuff, I'm going to try and continue this Bruins preview as quickly as possible so that I don't do any more of this stuff. All right. So we talked about the forwards. We talked about the defensemen. The goalies, we talked a little bit about. Um, but I think ultimately it is going to be your goaltending and your defense that carry this Boston Bruins team. We'll see how it plays out over the stretch of a long season. You know, I'm not 100% sold that Linus Ullmark is going to be your number one starter all year. I think there are going to be times where Jeremy Swayman takes the reins because I do think, as good as Linus is, that last year was a little bit of an exception, not a rule. I don't think he's going to be a top three goalie every year for the rest of his career. Um, Now, if he has a good defense in front of him and a good veteran forward group, which he does, then who knows? That could continue. But either way, you still have a very solid goaltending tandem. The Hockey News said it was the best in the league. I think last year they had it somewhere in the middle of the pack. So clearly, last year's success has bled off and has created a situation where there's high expectations on these goaltenders. But I would still have the expectation that at some point, who is considered the quote unquote starter will change the season. Now, as far as other expectations and where they sit in the league, look, we talked about this with Kyle. I would suggest you go listen to the Eastern Conference preview. It's in this feed as well. It's also on our YouTube channel if you're watching us here. And actually, I I wasn't sneezing and blowing my nose that night, so maybe that's better. But honestly, uh, I would say that this Bruins team is still good enough to make the playoffs for sure. Uh, I think some people have them higher than others. I think some people have them, finishing top two in the division, maybe second or third even. I have them as a fourth place wildcard team. I think the Atlantic is really competitive. I think there's going to be a lot of points dropped. And I think in the absence of Boston having a 135-point season like they had last year, there's going to be situations where other teams are going to take points out the Bruins because the Bruins aren't going to have the same kind of scoring and the same kind of dominance, and therefore the division as a whole is going to get more competitive. This was the case last year when I thought the Bruins had a really good chance because Florida regressed from being the top seed in the division and winning a ton of games and having a ton of points in 2021-22. That then last year the Bruins were able to, eat some of those points that were previously Florida's. Now, if another team eats the points in this division that were previously Boston's, that's another situation. And I'd actually love if the Bruins repeated the Florida blueprint, which is win the President's Trophy, get bounced, and then go take out the next year's President's Trophy winner in the first round. I would love if that happened, and that could happen if the Bruins end up playing the Leafs or the Panthers or somebody else in this division. I think Buffalo's the team you got to watch. I think a lot of people are high on Buffalo, specifically Tage Thompson, Devin Levi, and their extension of Rasmus Dahlin. Detroit and Ottawa, people are split on, and then Montreal, a lot of people believe will be in the lottery contention again. But I don't know about all of that. There's a lot to take in. I think in the Eastern Conference, what you should expect as a Bruins fan, this is what I always get to at the end of these podcasts, is as a Bruins fan, despite how amazing last year was, you should expect that not happen again. Obviously, I think that goes without saying. But this team, with its veterans, with guys like Pastrnak and McAvoy stepping up as the new core of this team following the Bergeron and Krejci departure, and then Chara and Rask before them, I think you're going to see a a um, a sort of retool of the Boston Bruins, an emergence of young players. They're going to fight every night for a win. They're not. I don't think they're going to get blown out often. Their goaltending and their defense is too good. They're going to play a lot of low-scoring games that are going to come down to those two parts of the game, goaltending and defense. And if they're able to weather the storm, I think you should expect them to compete for at least a wild card, if not a potential 3 or 2 spot in the Atlantic Division. And then as far as the playoffs are concerned, anything can happen. We understand that last year. The regular season, I think if you ask a lot of Bruins fans after last season, means nothing. So if they can just make it to the dance and then maybe a guy like Allmark or Swayman gets hot and the defense plays good and stays healthy, you never know what can happen. But I'd expect this team, if they do make the playoffs, to maybe not win more than one round at this point as currently constructed. But like I said, anything can change. It's going to be really exciting this season. It's exciting to have the Bruins back. I was loving it last night. The centennial is going to be great to celebrate, so I encourage you to kind of dive into that whenever you can. But we got Bruins hockey back, and it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Home Field Advantage. I apologize for not feeling great this morning and having a short show, but I appreciate you tuning in nonetheless. As always, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, whether that be Spotify, Apple, Google, or Stitcher. You could also check us out on YouTube, Sportland USA, and on Twitter and Instagram at HomefieldPod. But until next time, my name is Will Highland, and you've been listening and watching Home Field Advantage.